Hi all! For today's video, I wanted to use this photo as a reference, and I wanted to experiment with more color and add it onto the canvas in large patches. And I wanted to express the light-filled space of this open area, as well as the shade right underneath the tree on the right side. So I actually used an old canvas this time, and I roughly did a coating of yellows and oranges in the background. And from then on, I started doing some marking out the general land and the shape of the pathway. And I did distort this a little bit from the original reference. I would have made the perspective a little bit more exaggerated. And from then on, started adding blocks of color onto the background. So by adding white to the existing colors, I think it really created a sunlit area. And I have to say the piece was quite an experimental one, so I am kind of designing the colors as I go, and there's going to be some changes here and there where I work over things, but overall, a really fun piece. From then on, I started testing out the color of the shadows with a purplish tint. And to express the bush in front, there's going to be a lot of little strokes throughout the painting where I'm trying to paint the bush, you might say, of the foreground. These strokes are a lot longer and more prominent in the foreground, less clear in the background. I did use a slightly smaller brush, and I'll start expressing these trees in the background. So according to the reference, there's like a row of trees across the background, or maybe at the back of this field. And with the green, I've mixed in a little bit of blues, a bit of ochres to dim it down, just so that it's not a very sharp color. And also painting the larger, slightly more prominent tree towards the right side. There comes Jojo. Every now and then I'll have the company of the cats, who may choose to join me in the painting process and to be the featured model, little star of the video. And before the paints dry, since it is a background layer, I like to use the back of the brush and add some scratches to scratch the paint out so it looks like it creates the impression of distant branches. For the most prominent tree, I'll add some extra layers of color, a little bit more variation. And mixing that color in with the background patches of the wildflowers, which I'll paint with much smaller strokes due to perspective. Before I go on to the rest of the piece, I might just come back and add to the sky. Once I have the sky colour done as a contrasting colour layer, I'll be able to determine the colours of the foreground a lot better. And it seems like this one will have a pastel kind of colour effect. So hoping for a lot of bright pastel colours in the foreground later. When I paint in this style, I do like to use thick brush strokes, so thick paints, so that there's nice coverage. And every now and then I'll leave some gaps in that block colour to expose the background colour of the canvas. Painting between the trees will be a little bit fiddly, but can be done. Just takes a little bit of patience. And I've darkened the blue and added a little bit more sky blue as I've progressed to the right side. So with the current blue colours, I've mixed it with a little bit of green. And then I've kind of tried filling in the gaps between the trees. Hopefully this will create the effect of shadows. And with a smaller brush, I'll add in the branches, slightly smaller twigs and trunks. Coming back to just add a little bit of highlight colour to this tree in the background. And once that's done, I will come back to the foreground and progress into the next couple layers of flowers. I do like to use thick, bold strokes here without allowing the colours to mix very evenly. So keeping the block texture of each brushstroke. And again, longer strokes at the front. And I'll come back to roughly paint in this pathway as well. I will have different colors for the lighter areas and the areas in the shadow, but for now I'll use this pinkish color just as almost a marking layer. There's going to be a lot of layers of different colors in the wildflower bush over here, but basically longer, thicker strokes at the front and smaller strokes at the back with various colors. A break for some tea, and it seems like Jojo is back to accompany, back in his favorite box. And here I'll start using some darker colors to create more contrast throughout the piece. So this color would mainly be the phthalo blues and a little bit of ultramarine, a little bit of that existing greens. Jojo's a playful one. Everything is his business, so he's got to go around and have a look at what's going on. Continuing with the wildflower field, this would be the rose red plus a bit of that yellow, pastel yellow, and white, of course. And there is a tree in the foreground that I haven't yet expressed, so I'll start painting with that one. And that tree will actually cover up some of the background ones as well. And similar to the willow tree with the previous painting, I do like to use thick strokes, but a thin brush so that I can have plenty of color variation. To express the texture of the bark as well, so that the tree is not just a single color. And I'll come back here and add some highlights to this as well. When I add highlights, again, it's generally adding yellows and whites, sometimes oranges to the existing colors, just to brighten up the top layer. More highlights with more yellows and whites and a little tint of that previous green. And I'll start coming back with my smallest brush and I'll start dotting in some of those flowers, and I will group the colors as if the flowers are in little patches. I like to make sure the dots are smaller in the background and bigger in the foreground, again to show that perspective relationship between the flowers that are closer and the flowers that are further away. And I'll start adding some highlights to the areas that are in the light. More white, more white. I go through a lot of white, a lot of tubes of white with paintings like this. And although the background pathway is also in full sunlight, I will allow this color to fade out a little bit just because I want the foreground to pop out a lot more, so I'll keep the background simple. And larger dots in the foreground, so lots and lots of these, and with different colors as well. With the technique here, I'd like to make sure that each dot looks different. So in one way or another, I am using a different angle of my brush with each stroke. Sometimes I'm using the flat face, sometimes I'm using the thin side, sometimes I'm just using the corner of the brush to add a really small mark. This way, every mark put down is a little bit different. And the painting overall will look a lot more alive. there's a certain organic nature to it. That's not stamping, where each dot is more or less similar to one another. So in addition to the variation of shape of these brush strokes, there is also color variation. And again, these colors are inspired by the original reference. And I'll come back to add an even sharper layer of highlights with the brighter yellows, now that my sense of lighting is very clear. So touching things up here and there, little strokes with a lot of color variation throughout the piece. And here it's pretty much complete. I'll do a quick sign. And that is this sunny wildflower piece complete. So the process was a bit fiddly, and I do enjoy designing and mixing the colors as I go. It's been an enjoyable process with the company of Jojo, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If there's anything you'd like to see painted, let me know, and thanks for watching.